Chapter 51-51. Boss Battle. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Raven's body stepped forward, his eyes locked on the large goblin, its head slightly taller than his, with a large muscular chest with bulging blue veins. Its body was nearly double his, but somehow it managed to move with strange agility, stepping forward with a loud thud, roaring untangible words from its mouth. This is a low-level dungeon. Why do I suffer all this shit? He thought, seeing the familiar strange mana oozing from its body to form the extended health bar and number. Equals level 18. Ulkzoth. Bounty Hunter. The two stared at each other for several long moments before it charged. The floor vibrated under them, but only Raven broke away from its lunge. His movements were extra swift as lightning crackled and arced from his legs with each step, but the drain on his stamina and mind increased with each moment. Fuck this guy. Why is it another boss like Ragavad? He pulled an old axe from the stone pillar beside him, however, slightly rusted. Its durability was enough as Raven looked at the happy Lilith, still fighting goblins endlessly like a ballerina dancing in the dark arena at night. The constant experience that poured into his body allowed him to level up, as he instantly increased his body's attributes. What he needed for this monster was not some cheap tricks but pure unadulterated power. Attribute Strength 4.9. 5.2 Agility 2.4. 2.7 Stamina 6.4. 6.6 Vitality 6.9. 7.2 Intellect 3.2. 3.3 Wisdom 3.4. 3.5 Raven's muscles began to writhe and tighten as he reached 5 times the power of an average human. The muscles bulged as his body dashed forward, faster than before as they constricted, shrinking, but filled with more explosive force, as his black shadow swirled around his iron axe, tearing through the air as his fierce hack smashed into the goblin's body. It seemed more intimidating when last he saw it. His arm strength increased 5-fold, the axe pierced flesh and bone like butter. Black blades shot from his axe, and it tore apart the goblin's arm, almost cleaving it off entirely with a single strike. As the second strike was released, Raven's body spun rapidly, his back bending backwards to dodge the goblin's mighty swing, the extended arm causing a blast of violent wind to howl above his face, sharp rocks throw from the force, cutting his cheeks slightly. Raven pushed off toward where he intended to attack next. The axe pierced deep into its chest before exploding into shards of molten metal that blew off most of its skin and bits of flesh, hitting deep into its heart and stomach. Shit. The arcs of lightning around his body caused the damaged axe to lose its durability, and the shadow strike was just too powerful for cheap weapons. As the goblin survived, its bellowing roar filled the arena as it began to enter an agitated state, swiping wildly as black blood oozed from its chest. Raven wanted to finish the bastard, but its left arm smashed into his cheek, the power causing his mind to blank out, his vitality dropping to below 3 instantly as he flew across the arena, breaking through several pillars, using his tail to attempt to wrap around them, as it tore through them like foam, before rolling across the dirt, swaying as he stood to his feet. The distant goblin's eyes still focused on him as it began to tear a huge stone pillar from the ground, the stone crumbling and cracking under his power as it started swinging it as a club. His mind was still blank and empty after that blow. His muscles went cold. His body felt heavy. And then blackness began to envelop him. He tried desperately to move but couldn't. He couldn't even think straight. Raven wasn't used to fighting enemies with a strength similar to his own. This fight was essential for him to win without any cheap tricks and just his body. Shaking his head, he slapped his face, once again covering himself in the shadowy black aura and crackling lightning, watching as the goblin's colossal body began to rush towards him. Raven noticed Lilith seemed to want to help, but his mouth opened wide, bellowing. "Stay back, Lilith, this is my fight. I cannot be that stealthy and nimble fighter. Nor do I want to. Brutal, powerful, unstoppable." His ideal began to form in his mind, as his muscles started to restore their power, the goblin only a few meters away. Raven's legs tightened, his purple energy now pumping into all his strengths, slowly over time, learning how to use this force, remembering his failure in the training room. It couldn't be used to buff him permanently, but for a temporary increase in power, speed and strength. It was perfect. Yarark! Raven yelled, his legs pushing off the ground, the dirt and sand bursting around him like special effects, the black shadows coating his entire body, swirling around the tip of his sharp, barbed tail as he stomped towards the goblin. Their bodies huge, muscular and super heavyweights, they looked like they would snap any average human in half. And yet, Raven felt exhilarated as always. With that thought in mind, he brought his right arm up rapidly while swinging across with all of his might at one of its arms. A peculiar sensation shot through him when he smacked against flesh and bone like it wasn't even there. The goblin's eyes brightly illuminated as if it understood and praised Raven's actions, its opposite arm shooting forward, swinging towards him with the massive stone pillar, but before it reached him, Raven smashed past it with an electric blast. The post exploded into shards of rock, slicing their bodies. Yarark! He yelled again at its monstrous speed while lifting one of its arms with all of his might while swinging at its chin with a fierce hooking blow. The blow was powerful enough that he could have crushed an iron log or boulder, but instead, he had destroyed the hulking goblin's jaw with a crunch. Grerarek! The goblin stumbled back with its lower jaw now hanging off, the bloody skin of its cheeks holding it attached as it began to ooze with blood, spitting and swallowing the broken teeth. But the goblin's dazed eyes could not take any breaks, as Raven's assault didn't end, his body like lightning, identical to his father's movements appearing at the side of the goblin, throwing a brutal knee into its kidney. Yarark! The giant stumbled backwards on its knees while collapsing forward, its arms falling limply down as it fell onto its back before finally getting up once more. It didn't seem much different from when he first saw it. Raven's thick tail began to stab towards the goblin, rapidly with countless thrusting blows, like an army of wasps as he ripped and tore the goblin's chest and stomach into a disgusting mess of flesh and blood, a step from victory as the goblin suddenly swiped the sharp shards of sandy dust into Raven's eyes. His vision went completely white. The sand exploded in front of him and blinded him. His strike suddenly slowed down, before the goblin, desperate to survive, fired a powerful uppercut, smashing into the face of Raven, sending his back soaring into the air, as blood oozed from his nose and lips. Raven's head bounced across the arena floor before slamming against a stone pillar, the world spinning around him. He couldn't feel his hands or his body, but there was something else. Blood, so much of it. He was drowning in it. As the blackness lifted from his mind and his vision began to return, the goblin's torso was a pulpy mass of bloody tissue. He was so close. Then he was back, but it wasn't over yet. He could see the goblin staring at him with its one good eye as it struggled to stand on two legs, its jaw hanging loose, but the other was broken. I should be dead. Damn it. He was shocked at his luck, if not for his fantastic regeneration. That uppercut would have killed him. Now seeing less than one vitality remaining, although it was quickly restoring, the goblin was already on its feet. In the distance, he could see Lilith, her eyes filled with hatred and anger as her body was visibly shaking, her hands swirling with pink and black mist, likely her shadow spike spell being cast, but held back. She is cute. Following my words. I need to get up, this girl will probably steal the glory if I don't. Gaha. His body felt heavy, blood seemed to cover the entire arena. When he noticed something grim. On the ground, several steps from his body, there was a crushed pulpy mess with bits of skull hair and flesh, some teeth and neon eyes. Raven suddenly felt a surge of anger, of pain in his body. Isn't that my head? He was suddenly feeling a strange realization. He looked up slowly. How could he see if that blow knocked his head off? The goblin's body staggered towards him, its eyes tired, body oozing black blood. While Raven felt his face. A smooth touch, large eyes, deep brows, and a sharp but powerful nose. His fingers began to slide over his face, two tusks protruding slightly from his lips. As all his face remained, only two massive curved horns now grew from his temples. His hair felt silky and long. When pulling a strange, it wasn't black, but silver like Lilith's hair. I'm a manticore, a real one. The giant goblin snarled as he brought a clawed hand down on the sand, aiming at Raven. Its red eyes glared into his, filled with unnatural power and madness. The claws were sharp and razor sharp, like nothing else. But Raven's arm, filled with fur and sharp talons, grabbed the goblin effortlessly, his lower body now two long thick pole-dot-like limbs, with black hooves denser than iron, stronger than steel. His colossal tail caused the wind to howl and whistle merely by swaying as it flickered over his shoulder, piercing forward like a scorpion's, the sharp tip lunging towards the goblin's half-exposed heart. It pierced straight through the organ, boring into the goblin's stomach, leaving a gush of black blood and gore to pour. The goblin roared with fury as it tried to strike back, but its massive body was far too slow, too large and weak compared to his now enlarged physique. The stinger became lodged deep into its stomach, the force tearing off most of its ribs, causing it to howl in pain as a strange venom began to pump into its body, the goblin's body now shuddering, as a new emotion showed on its face. Fear. Growler. The creature's body trembled, its eyeballs bulged from their sockets, and then it exploded, sending black blood and chunks of flesh and bone flying about the arena. Raven stood, shaking, his eyes glowed brightly, his skin covered in the black mist. He had won. But then the black smoke vanished as quickly as it appeared, returning his skin to normal, his hair back to being a black mane. Before his body could reach the ground, a soft pair of hands wrapped around his body, gentle and lovingly stroking his bloody body and cheeks. I think I pushed myself too far. You were so cool. So sexy. Raven's distant hearing listened to Lilith's praise. As his scenes grew distant, somehow, her hands began to touch him lustfully before his mind went black. Chapter 52-52. While he fights, so does she. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Emily sat back in her comfortable shrubbery, the beautiful flowers blooming along with her current mood, between delighted and worried. Phyllis was supposedly infertile. But this information wasn't told to Alistair. Now she is pregnant, and the father is. Thanks to her mother's position in this city, getting the secret medical files was no issue because of the need to check a person's blood type and race and ensure all dangerous monsters were kept in their sight. Even the doctor-patient confidentiality law was meaningless to the Bureau. I should contact her. It seems they did break up stupidly. Emily's flowers bloomed purple, a mixture of envy, worry and determination. She didn't want to have Raven to herself, knowing that this woman was a big part of his life. Thus she began to reach for her phone, taking a deep breath as she wondered if it was an alright time to call. 8:04 p.m. It should be okay. Her eyes looked over the documents on her little laptop, hovering with the branches of her tree rooted in the center of the room, used for her backrest as she sat on a small tree stump covered in soft leaves. She could see the night sky from where she sat, which had only added to her evening, enjoying the cool air with the scent of fresh earth as she waited, her breathing slowing down as she arranged her mind. Beep. Beep. Boop. Beep. Brrr. The phone began to dial. She felt a strange lump in her throat, a little difficult to swallow as her chest began to race. Worried, she didn't want to lose Raven if Phyllis suddenly told him the truth, ran back to him. What could Emily do? But she looked at the data and couldn't let Raven be in the dark for too long. Phyllis Seals Isoldria 4, pregnant. Child, female. Race. Orc/elf. Age. 4 months 4 days. Expected delivery. 4 years, 10 months, 22 days. Beep. H. Hello. A soft voice sounded while the bubbling sound of a bath filling said in the background, her voice seeming a little startled. Emily's heart began to race as she heard her tone change, her breathing became quicker as she listened, but she remained calm, her hands gripping her knees tightly. Hello. It's me, Emily. Sorry to bother you so late. Is it okay to chat? Oh, The woman laughed like she was thrilled. I didn't expect you to call so soon after we split up. Do you mind if I use hands-free and video chat? Of course not. She could hear the sound of liquid, soap suds and a curtain being drawn as Phyllis removed her robe, revealing a sexy body as her lower body had, Alistair, tattooed across her shaved pelvis as Phyllis climbed into her tub. So, why the call, Emily? Oh, my God. She's got his name tattooed on her pussy. How dirty. Yet. I feel jealous. Emily's mind raced as she tried to control her anger, jealousy and concern as she typed quickly, deciding to get on with her work while she chatted with Phyllis to help ease her mind. Oh. Did that tattoo make you feel awkward? Haha. Raven himself engraved that on me. Foo-foo, I begged him so much to mark me forever. It seems to make him get hard each time he sees it. Ahaha. Rather. I felt jealous. Why not get him to tattoo your ass? Then we would match. Like Rod sisters. Foo-foo, he likes that kind of thing, showing your devotion, but never asks himself. Emily felt more relaxed from the gentle voice, her eyes watching as the perfect elven beauty began to wash her body, humming the tune Raven always liked to listen to. I called because of your little girl. It's his, right? What do you mean by, the elf woman's voice suddenly became more excited, her hands sliding under her legs as she lifted her hips. Yes. Yes, it is. And yes, I'm pregnant. Isn't it wonderful news, right? I couldn't believe it when they told me. My sister was adamant. But they told me I was infertile years ago. Ha ha ha, over 400 cream pies, maybe more. Sometimes we did it without him leaving my insides all day. That I am. Her eyes went to a new image on her laptop. A baby was growing inside a womb, only a faint image, but it caused Emily to feel joy rather than jealousy and anger. Congratulations, Phyllis. Honestly, I called to discuss the future. Mine. Yours. And our future with Alistair and his future women. She didn't mention any names. Oh, is that what you call it? A threesome. Phyllis's fingers started to wander about her body as she stared at the screen, her green eyes filled with delight. Emily almost spat out her tea. This elf was strange. However, thanks to her being so weird, Emily's heart was at ease, she felt less stressed and could calmly think about her needs. I think in future he might have many more women. At least, there's a minotaur who enjoys his cock. Oh. You mean the ardent orcs Miriam? You watched that? Well. The bumps of his cock and the angle it bends were identical to Alistair. It was bigger, like 3.4 centimeters bigger. But I could always know it was his cock from the start. You too. Ha ha ha. The two women began to discuss the videos, no longer feeling strange. As almost an hour passed, Phyllis slowly got out of the tub, her body silky and smooth as she wore a white cotton robe. Her body was curvy and pristine, even Emily admired her beauty. Honestly, Emily. I won't tell him yet. He finally spread his wings. Did you see his happy face? How can I suddenly drop this on him? I wanted to rush into his arms forever when we met. My emotions were crazy after realizing his little girl was in my stomach, but after listening, I chose to wait. If he comes to me, I'll accept him, his women and feelings, all of it. He sacrificed his body, dreams and life for me. For over 8 years. Nothing to an elf. Emily listened as the call went silent, looking at the slightly emotional Phyllis, who lay on her soft white bed, stacks of paper and books around her room. I might be stupid, but those 8 years are worth more than my future. That's why I want to give him all the happiness and joy in the world. Phyllis looked at the phone, her face beautiful as she seemed to be illuminated by the light. So if he had a harem of women, you'd be fine with that? Emily was curious as she noticed Phyllis began to stroke the name across her pelvis. Emily. I love him, even if he only spoke to me once a year. I will accept everything, no matter how extreme. If he asked me to give birth to hundreds of girls, I would. I am a slave to his love. And cock after all. Phyllis whispered the last bit, but the phone picked it up, causing Emily to blush, her flowers fluttering red and pink. The elf chuckled softly, her body covered in a blanket. How about you? Will you accept it if he starts fucking me again? Can you bear seeing him pounding me while you sit watching? Phyllis giggled, you're shy, aren't you? Don't worry, we can keep this between us for now. But I know Raven loves me and should understand this choice. What do you think? It might be fun to service his new cock together, right? You seem like a good girl, that small mouth kissing his balls. I can take the tip and shaft. Emily's cheeks burned. I think. It's okay. Phyllis smiled as she leaned over the camera. It's okay then. Just remember, if you ever need me, ask. We could have some fun like sisters if you like. I don't want to be enemies with you just because you're dating him now. I love Alistair, and he chose you as his lover. That means you must be a special girl and very kind at heart. So I trust his taste, let's make him happy together, I'll support you, you help me. The elf's words were like magic to her. She felt the warmth in her chest, her eyes filling with tears of joy and her head nodding. She couldn't imagine Alistair not wanting her to stay in his life. She knew it was too soon, she didn't want to lose her chance. Don't cry, little dryad. I'll make sure you are the next girl he knocks up. Fufu, do you want to join me next time I go for a scan? To see our cute little jewel of love? Yes. Emily shouted happily, wiping her eyes with her sleeve. The conversation began to improve. Emily felt so at ease with Phyllis, her soft words, the gentle subjects, like she got an elder sister from nowhere. Despite being 400 years old. The two of them talked for hours, sharing stories of their love for Alistair, how they came together, how much they loved him, and their hopes and dreams. Eventually, the conversation ended when they agreed to meet again and made plans. After hanging up, Emily sat back on the couch, staring at her laptop as the screensaver showed a tiny elf playing the harp, her fingers moving gracefully across the strings as she hummed a sweet melody. She sighed as she looked at her hands, she could feel the warm glow as she thought back on the night before, the kiss from Raven as her mind raced through what she had learned from Phyllis. I am so lucky. Phyllis is so nice, and he'll never let her be alone. That cute baby. I cannot wait to see her. A knock on the door caused her to jump, and her heart raced. It was Nenethrana, her mother. Hello, are you all right, Emily? I heard you talking. I'm okay. I was chatting with Phyllis and a little too excited. Ho ho, Phyllis, Raven's ex and the mother of his child. Can you handle it? Do you need mommy's advice? No. Mother, I like Phyllis and want to be with him, so I will help them patch things up. Emily's hands trembled, but her smile grew bigger as she stood up. Oh. Do you mean it? I'm so happy for you. I have been worried since you started dating a boy, but it seems he's changed you. My cute little shy girl seems more extroverted. Mommy might cry alone. Emily kicked her cushions at the door with a bang. I'm not letting you fuck my boyfriend. TSK, stingy. Mommy is lonely. Go thrust yourself onto a branch. Fufu, a thick orcish branch. Mother. Hoo hoo hoo. Chapter 53-53. Overnight in the Dungeon, 1, you are listening at Novel Full.audio. Lilith sat with the sleeping Raven for several hours. She was already level 5 and learned a new skill, but she didn't care. The desire to fight was exhausted from killing the goblins. Now she looked at the man with a beautiful face sleeping on her lap, her fingers brushing through his silky black hair. His lashes are long. And such a smooth and pretty nose. Is he truly an orc? She looked around the room. Sadly the goblins she killed began to melt into the ground. Lilith learned that if you killed the boss of a dungeon floor, they stopped respawning completely. Suddenly Raven's phone began to vibrate. It seemed that more time had passed than Lilith thought. It's already 1 a.m. We were supposed to buy things today. Should I just let him sleep, and we leave in the morning? Her eyes looked down at his body, the deep breaths reminding her that he was still alive as she stroked along his cheeks, the memories of her awakening filling her mind as she blushed. I can't believe. My tail is used obscenely. But it felt connected to a strange sensation. As if he was putting it inside my actual pussy. Will he think I'm a weird monster girl? But he filled me with more cum than Miriam did. Does he enjoy my body more? Lilith's mind was filled with many thoughts. Now the initial wild and bestial emotions began to settle. She looked at Raven completely as her male from the moment he did those things to her tail. In fact, she wanted him to use her actual body, but also felt happy when he resisted the temptation. I'm so strange. Part of me wanting to bang him even now, part of me wanting him to take me on dates and slowly charm me. Shaking her head, she set the alarm on his phone for 11:30 am. It was a little early, but she wanted to give him a good rest. Still remembering when his head was smashed from his body, Lilith almost went limp and berserk before his manticore form instantly transformed, replacing his usual orc self. Thankfully, his head was still attached. Honestly, I thought he might never return to normal. Her heart began to throb as his body shifted, now his breath blowing and sucking her lower body, as a ticklish and light pleasure fluttered around her body from her pelvis. Lilith leaned down, softly pressing her lips against his cheek, before pulling away, her lips and cheeks feeling strange when she kissed him. It was like their energies became mixed and made her chest feel hot and excited. Let's sleep. She whispered, her fingers stroking his hair as she used her tail as a pillow. Beep. 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 The phone alarm began to sound, its heart-rending tone and the slight vibrations causing Raven to stir suddenly, jumping up from her lap. He pressed his rough hands against the arena floor, feeling disorientated. The last memory was seeing his head crushed. During sleep, these images and his mind continued to make him believe he died. Raven grabbed the phone, looking at Lilith curled up like a cat as he disabled the alarm and checked his messages. There's not much I can do now, let's just message her honestly and meet her today instead, but tonight I am meeting Miriam, so let's try to keep on track. To Emily. Chapter 54-54. Overnight in the Dungeon, 2, you are listening at Novel Full.audio. He clicked off the call and stood up, stretching his arms as he felt the need to use the bathroom, pulling down his pants and about to urinate. The strange tip of her tail formed a different type of cup and slipped around his end, as the hot stream began to pour inside. Raven's eyes widened as he looked at the stunned Lilith, her face looking at her tail with a blushing face. Did you just? Ah. Sorry. I didn't mean to. It's okay, it's just. That was very unexpected. Don't worry, I'm not mad at you. I'm more curious than anything. Is this all right? Raven wondered as he began to shake himself. The soft insides were not the same as yesterday but felt like a sponge as they vibrated and wiped him clean. I don't think so. I mean, it feels good, but you have a big cock. Really? I thought you enjoyed my dick. Yes, but it's too big, and it hurts when I squeeze it. And try to clean under those big glands. Heh. What am I saying? She turned away with a cute face, causing Raven to smile as he slipped from her tail, transforming into a strange spade-like tip almost identical to a succubus. So we're going to meet a blacksmith after leaving. What kind of weapon do you want? Also, you managed to reach level 5. How amazing! Lilith stood up, her body freely leaning against his chest, as her warm body and sweet scent filled his nostrils, running her sharp nails along his firm muscular chest, feeling Raven's thick tail naturally curling around hers as they twisted and entwined together, his tip teasing hers as she tried not to moan with a bright red face. Do you want to see my status before we leave? Then. What weapon do you think I should use? Look. I am super strong now, hee. Oh, Lilith Novalia, oh, obsessive bride, orc stalker. Oh, Manticore, Luna variant, oh, age 24, visually 19, oh, blood type M.69, oh, level 5, oh, class Blossom Reaper, oh. Experience 7/50ths attribute strength, 2.1 agility, 4.6 stamina, 1.9 vitality, 1.9 intellect, 3.5 wisdom, 3.40 skills. Manticore's heart, passive, max. Increases control over vitality and stamina regeneration and absorption, the perfect mate for a male manticore. Manticore's body, passive, max. Increases recovery of mana and willpower and boosts intellect and vitality at each level. Shadow Spike, level 1, assault the enemy's mind with deadly spikes of shadow, penetrating their skull for lethal shadow damage. No cooldown 1 second cast time. Wisdom 0.3 Blossom Step, max, dart through the air after becoming an ethereal nether blossom, blooming with a beautiful rose cloud, intangible and immune to damage. 3 charges. 10-second cooldown. Instant cast. Wisdom 0.1 Stamina 0.2 Mana Eater, passive, level 1, suck away the opponent's mana on death and piercing attacks, converting it to strength, stamina and mana. Brood Mother's Howl, level 1, cause terror to all enemies around you, stopping their actions for 1.5 seconds and increasing the damage you deal to them by 20% for 10 seconds, the damage you cause will be lowered for 5 seconds after the effect ends. 20-second cooldown. No cost. See. I am so fast. And smart, he praise me. Raven felt the softness of her body against his chest as she hugged him tightly, kissing his cheek as she tried to pull away. He wrapped his arms around her back, holding her in place. I'll buy you something nice today, okay? Okay, but don't make it too expensive, Raven. Well, I want the best for my cute Lilith. Humph, you filled my tail with that lewd white stuff. You seem to enjoy it, though, right? Lilith giggled lightly before smiling sweetly at him with her big violet eyes. Ah. Yes, I did. He could feel the heat of her breath as she kissed his neck, and he ran his hand along her back before lifting her chin. As the pair stared into each other's eyes, Raven kissed her soft pink lips, squishing them as he enjoyed their marshmallow texture. He felt her tongue against his own, and she tasted like sweet berries and honey, as his lips sucked on her tongue, making her moan as he moved his hands to the top of her head, stroking through her soft white hair. I love you, Lilith. He uttered, not even thinking, it came from his pure feelings. I love you too, Raven. They kissed again as her soft breasts pressed against his chest. Still, they soon broke it off, a strange look glinting in their eyes as they held each other's hand gingerly, like a new couple who had just started dating, as they walked towards the exit. Still, their tails were rubbing and coiling each other passionately, a completely different look to the pure and non-sexual hand context. As her tip began to deform the same shape as the day before, letting his tail, which started to resemble a particular object, push into the small opening as Lilith and Raven tried to stifle their gasps. Your tail is so lewd. Why is it the same shape as your cock? NNNNM. Don't let others see. Such a bad man. She mumbled with a defiant attitude while Raven snorted. The strange sensation was shared with his actual body as he struggled to keep it contained in his pants. Damn. Who is lewd? Your slutty little tail is practically violating my tail. I'll be happy to violate you more, Raven. The pair chuckled and walked towards the dungeon exit, as their tails slowly stopped being extreme, now wrapped around each other, as they left the dungeon with giant smiles. Raven, I want to be your woman, even if you have others. Her deep voice sounded as she turned back to him. I don't care if you have others, just love me at least the same you do them, okay? Maybe a little more. Lilith's voice trailed off as she jumped into the portal with an embarrassed face. He watched the back of the strange girl. From the moment they entered the dungeon together, he was sure things would change. However, he never expected the arrogant little manticore from the past few days would suddenly say something like that, or even the acts they did with each other's tails. I had fun with her. He stepped forward, arranging his thoughts: Phyllis, Emily, Lilith and Miriam. These women became increasingly alluring as he furthered his transformation into a manticore. As Raven stepped out of the portal and looked up at the blue sky, he could hear the faint sounds of music coming from the nearby street. He began to walk towards the sound as the soft breeze brushed against his face. Lilith was now standing on the corner as she looked at the busker, wondering what he was singing about. The Pianist's Lament. The vocal edition. So soothing. The man continued to play as the street filled with people, and the sweet scent of flowers filled the air. While the song played, Lilith's hand naturally found Raven's as the listeners seemed enchanted. While behind them, an expensive black executive car pulled up, a beautiful woman with green hair slowly stepped out, several females in suits helping her out, then guided her towards Raven. Sorry to keep you waiting, darling. Her cute voice sounded as she and Lilith looked at each other. Chapter 55. The Goblin Anvil. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Emily wrapped her arms and vines around his right arm, her soft lips kissing his cheek, but Raven could tell she was a little sleepy. Her light makeup couldn't cover the slightly dark eyes as his arm wrapped around her waist, kissing her cheek. You all right? Seem a little sleepy. Let me lean on you, okay? Sure. Raven lifted her slightly, allowing her to rest most of her weight on his right side. At the same time, his left arm opened as if offering the spot to Lilith. Their tails were still coiled together after all, but he felt the vines of Emily exploring his body as if checking he was all right. You've got such a thick and hard tail now. The tip looks a little lewd. She whispered into his ear, nibbling it as Lilith stopped watching Emily and climbed into his embrace. Although the busker's music was soothing, these two women were more relaxed. I think you're beautiful, Raven. And I love your soft lips, Emily. And I love your cute tail, Lilith. As he spoke, he kissed her soft pink lips and felt the warmth of her breath. He wrapped his arm around her slender waist, feeling her breasts press against his chest and the softness of her skin. My tail is cute, hee. Emily giggled, shaking her head. She wrapped her vines around the young manticore and pulled her into their embrace, making her gasp as the two girls were held tightly against Raven's chest. The look of envy from the women towards Emily and Lilith, and the men took a look at these two hot women, only to see the vast body of Raven and turn away without a word. Raven enjoyed the softness of the breasts and bodies pressing against him as Lilith snuggled in his embrace. As they walked towards the busy artisan area Raven had never visited, he saw countless strange shops and stores. As Emily and Lilith giggled, he kissed them both in return and then turned to Lily as she smiled, as if he couldn't decide who to kiss first. The two girls seemed to find a balance, his body wrapped in leaves, flowers and vines, but his black tail was entangled by Lilith's as he watched the two begin speaking. So, Lilith, you are living with Raven. Ah, I couldn't resist his scent and essence and became a prisoner to his huge. Haha. I'm half joking. When I was in my darkest moments, I met him on the bus, and his mere presence saved me from a miserable life. Then once again, as I faced injustice and isolation, he saved me and then took me in and I truly fell in love with him, not just his top-class essence. Raven was shocked by the serious voice from Lilith's lips, his neon-blue eyes looking at her severe and wild face. He remembered that this girl was quite brutal and violent, only becoming soft and gentle when she moved in with him. He wanted more of this feisty and aggressive Lilith, especially in bed. Emily was shocked at how blunt she was, mentioning his essence was usually a spot of embarrassment for female monsters. They were torn between their feelings and the need to feed. But this girl was adamant, not only did she accept her need to provide, but also her affection towards him. Was it love or just a fleeting hunger? Oh. Emily looked impressed by that answer. Raven thought as he noticed her smile became more relaxed and less forced. He listened to the two as they slowly began to speak more harmoniously. Lilith didn't mince her words, being honest about her tale being fucked by him and that she wanted to have sex with him, while Emily responded with equal honesty, saying she wanted to start a family with Raven eventually, but also would accept his lovers, no matter how many. At first, I might kill any woman that tried to take him from me. Lilith whispered, but the pair quickly heard her. As they entered the district of blacksmiths and crafters, the thick scent of heated steel and boiling herbs slowly filled their noses. Raven walked through the city district, his two lovers, Lilith and Emily, by his side. They were creatures of magic and myth, and Raven couldn't help but feel a sense of pride as they walked together through the bustling streets. But he felt these two ladies needed time to speak together, although they were open now. They have things they cannot say to my face yet, let's let them have some time together. You two, how about we split up and browse what we want? I'll go see that cool armor shop first. He saw that Lilith seemed to want to object before Emily leaned into her ear, softly whispering something as the cute manticore shook her head and nodded. Humph, go do whatever you want. She grabbed Emily's hand and dashed away, leaving Raven to watch the two women and their beautiful bodies disappear. Lilith's eyes gleamed with interest as they passed the various shops and storefronts, her manticore instincts drawn to the gleaming weapons and armor on display. On the other hand, Emily was more interested in the various herbs and plants on display in the potion shops, her dryad senses drawn to the scents and aromas of the different plants. Although he said he would give them space, Raven watched from close by, unable to hear this conversation. Sometimes they bickered a little or giggled, but he saw a side of Lilith that made me feel at ease. It was like she had a friend. He couldn't serve all her life roles, it was her support and lover or being a friend. I couldn't be both to her, as I am too biased. He watched Emily's flowers flutter in various colors, her branches and vines also protecting Lilith's defenseless body as she wore the light white dress. Some males would occasionally come to chat with them, but her glare and vines scared them off quickly. Emily. You are one of the best things to happen to me since meeting Phyllis. He whispered before entering a small armor shop. Raven was fascinated by the intricate and beautiful craftsmanship on display. He had never seen such finely wrought swords and armor before, and he couldn't help but be impressed by the skill of the craftsman. The time part from them was around 1 hour, and he finally found them both looking at a small elderly lady's shop as they giggled together. He wasn't sure why, however. Lilith and Emily were more interested in the magical items and potions and spent more time in the potion shops than Raven did. Hey, my two cute girls, what can I do for you both? The three walked from shop to shop, admiring the various wares on display. They were welcomed warmly by the craftsmen, who were used to the presence of magical creatures in their midst. However, what made them feel welcomed most was that even if they didn't buy anything, the owners didn't think wrongly. Instead, they would leave them with parting remarks. Make sure to find the best weapons and armor that suit you. A lost customer that lives is better than a dead customer that chose my store hastily because they could always come back. Raven was happy to see Lilith and Emily enjoying themselves and getting along. As they began chatting more as the day passed, somehow, he saw an image of himself surrounded by these wonderful girls, Emily beside him as the cornerstone, while Lilith was a mood maker. They were yet to go through much together, but he was grateful for their support and companionship. As they walked through the district, Raven couldn't help but feel a sense of unity with his lovers, holding both of their waists, his fingers sinking into their soft curves, and both girls moaning slightly with sultry voices. "I love you both, don't ever leave my side," Raven whispered for only them to hear. After walking for a while, Raven, Lilith, and Emily finally arrived at their destination. The shop in front of them was smaller than most of the ones they had seen, but it had a certain charm that drew them in. Above the door, a sign read, "The Goblin Anvil." Chapter 56-56. Melzentia, you are listening at novelfull.audio. As they walked inside, a beautiful female goblin blacksmith stood over a large anvil, her thick hammer smashing down, each blow causing her body and huge breasts to shake with an alluring wobble. However, she was short in stature, her hips were broad, with thick muscles and soft flesh covering her body. "I want her." Her small size belied her strength and skill, and Raven could tell she was a master of her craft, but his loins were interested in more than her skill as a blacksmith, unable to control his instincts as a young manticore. "I want to push her down." Raven's eyes were almost glued to her smooth ass, round like orange. As it jiggled from her intense movements, the clanging of the black steel filled his ears. While Raven watched her with lustful eyes, Emily and Lilith began to observe the shop walls lined with weapons and armor, all expertly crafted. Suddenly the goblin female seemed to notice the group, or instead saw them the moment they entered, but finally finished her initial phase, completing the sword she appeared to be crafting. "Welcome, to the Goblin Anvil. My name is Melzentia," the goblin said with a friendly smile, her soft red eyes looking towards Raven as her pupils dilated for a moment. Looking at his body and beautiful almond skin, she couldn't help but swallow before facing the woman. "What can I do for you today?" "We're looking for some special equipment," Raven replied. "We need weapons and armor specifically designed to fight monsters." The goblin nodded. "I see. Well, you've come to the right place. I specialize in crafting items for those who fight against the demons. I have a wide selection of weapons and armor designed to be effective against various monsters." "Demons." Raven nodded, moving closer as he felt his lust fade slightly, wanting first to tell her his ideal weapon. Melzentia moved close to him as she seemed to lack personal space, her ample hips tapping against him as she pulled out a digital pad with various weapon types, then wiped them, showing him the handles, shafts and blades specialized in. "How about this? Are you looking for a huge mace for your massive body, identical to your phallus? Or a great sword?" He felt her hand sometimes slide close to his crotch as it was level with her pad, unable to know if she was just being friendly or didn't understand, but seeing her eyes sometimes shifting to his lower body, he realized this goblin was a lewd woman. "We're looking for something particular," Raven said. "We need enchanted weapons to be effective against creatures with thick armor and defenses and armor resistant to damage and able to change shape." What type?" "I want an axe for myself, 200 centimeters at least. Heavy with a huge head, but also durable. Price isn't an issue. I am very heavy-handed." Lilith and Emily looked around the shop, their eyes lighting up as they saw the various items on display. Raven could tell that they were impressed with the quality of the craftsmanship. Melzentia nodded again. "I can do that. It will take some time, but I can craft your needed items. If you give me your number, then message me the exact measurements of your body and the girls, then I'll start working on them and have them finished in 24.48 hours if you pay 100 credits extra." Raven smiled. "That's exactly what we need. So here's what I was thinking." Suddenly ignoring her slightly flirtatious movements, the pair began to speak in detail about his new axe. He told her about his mother and how he fights. As her red eyes gleamed, there seemed to be a small phoenix plume along her ears which caught his interest. This woman was somebody he wanted to know better. She understood him when he mentioned wanting to have a particular feature, like the ability to shorten the axe into a regular hand axe but increase its power. She began to draw rough design ideas as the pair became engrossed in designing his weapon. It'll cost about 900 credits for your axe. I'll give you a discount on the cute girl's dual daggers. Raven just turned to her, their noses almost brushing together as he smirked. Her tiny body leaned over to him, whispering into his ears, "You must have some thick essence if you can pleasure a manticore and act so normal. Would you like to taste it?" Meanwhile, Lilith and Emily watched from a few meters away, their faces twitching as they saw the female blacksmith's hands now stroking their lovers behind. "Hey! Is Raven always like this, Lilith? Why do I feel he's a complete gigolo?" Isn't it because he's handsome and sexy? It seems normal to me. As long as he doesn't forget to love me too." The opinion of a dryad and manticore may differ because one is a very honest beast that lives by its desires and needs, while the dryad cares for its surroundings and balance. But he was like that since we met. In truth, Raven had never thought of his lovers in those terms. A manticore and a dryad, and he knew from Emily that she was attracted to his kind side, but he was trying to figure out where things were going for him since he changed. His heart became freer. If he saw a beautiful woman, although he felt she was pretty, he wouldn't rush to her. It was only those who made his chest click, like Lilith, Emily, Miriam, that cute fox Miu and this new woman Melzentia. However, the goblin smith seemed quite interested in him and was willing to show her interest in more ways than their current conversation as her hands slid down his back, her thick fingernails scratching gently. "I find your scent attractive too. Fufu, how about you come to collect the weapons alone, and I'll let you hammer my anvil. Raven looked at her with a wry smile before he laughed and patted her head. "Maybe, it sounds enticing. I'll think about it. Here are the credits." He swiped his wrist over the current receipt for 1,350 credits, leaving him with 950 and over 100 for Lilith's pocket money for snacks and cute things after defeating that annoying boss. "Come on, Emily, Lilith," Raven grinned as he held a fist to shake. "Let's go home while this beauty works on our weapons." They left the small shop after quickly chatting with the goblin as she waved them on their way. He took one last look at the beautiful goblin before turning around, feeling his cock twitch when she licked her lips. "Raven, are you attracted to that goblin?" Emily asked softly, her flowers blossoming a cute pink and orange as if curious and filled with romantic delight. To be honest, something inside my body began to explode the moment I saw her body. It was like something screaming, she was meant to be mine. We were born to be together. I am not sure," he said with an honest and straightforward tone. However, his chest felt something too. His chimera part, something to do with his cultivation technique, maybe the evolution. Raven felt it needed her and helped her be in his strike zone. "It reminds me of that female goblin orc porn I saw a young man. I want to have my own little sultry goblin wife." "You can say it," Emily said softly as he turned to her, looking into her big dark eyes. "We are all adults, it's okay to feel attraction. That's healthy." "Yes, I want her. I wanted to take her the moment I entered, even with you both around." So you like big butts. And huge tits. Seems easy." Lilith muttered as she looked at her body with a happy grin. "I wonder how she tastes." "Well, at least that makes two of us," Raven added with a slightly wry smile. Emily nodded as if accepting his feeling as her hand grasped his, stroking his soft knuckles while entangling his hand with her vines as she stood beside his ear. "Make sure you fuck me first, I want your cock before the next girl, okay?" Mwah. Her soft lips kissed his ear as she lowered, amused at the slightly embarrassed looking Raven with a victorious grin. Chapter 57. A Soft Palm. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Raven, Emily, and Lilith walked along the darkening streets, all with warm smiles as they reached her parked car. Her blue sports car was attractive to Raven. Thankfully he had a license, sometimes needing to drive his boss places or take Phyllis to business meetings, but it wasn't like he used his care and used rentals in the past. "Fufu, my baby, did you miss mommy?" Emily purred as her branches began to sway as they shrank into her back, the soft vines opening the car doors, as she looked back to Raven and Lilith, realizing, there were only two doors. Oh. Are you going to sit on his lap? Foo-foo, how erotic. Lilith, I bet you'd love to sit on his lap too. He looked at the two girls who started to get along, at first slowly, he thought they were arguing all the time, but the sly smile of Emily and her flora that bloomed in cheerful colors and Lilith's swaying tail and cheeky grin made him realize they got along just fine. Ah. Emily, can you take her home? I have something to do tonight and cannot miss it. Tonight. Emily whined. We aren't going to bathe together. Lilith added. His body stepped forward, lifting Lilith into a tight hug, his arms wrapped around her waist, as his tail stroked along her thigh and poked her tail as they brushed noses together. He didn't know how comfortable she was with public affection but soon found out. Stupid. Kiss me properly. Lilith's hands gripped his cheeks, her fingers squishing into his face as she kissed him, sliding her tongue past his lips and into his mouth. He wrapped his arm around her back and under her ass, holding her against his chest, his cock pressing against her soft garden, squishing it as they kissed passionately. FFFFT, the pair moaned and groaned as tongues explored each other's mouths, his cock becoming harder between her pedals before he pulled away with a wet pop and helped her sit inside Emily's car. At the same time, the Dryad watched him with a female wolf's eyes, her vine swayed as she saw him approach with confident steps. My cute Emily. He whispered into her ear, feeling her hair tickle his nose. The Dryad sighed, her eyes glazed over as she closed the door and locked the car before leaning against it. What can you do? You want to fuck me? He laughed lightly before he placed his left hand on her soft hips, his fingers gripping and caressing her curvy waist, and wrapped his right around her breasts as he squeezed firmly. I do. Emily's lips trembled as they parted. She could feel the heat of his hard cock through his pants as she leaned in and sniffed his exposed chest, her little lips kissing him. You smell good. You like the way I smell? Yes. She breathed, reaching her hands up to his shoulders, and pulling herself up against him, feeling his cock poke her in the belly as their bodies ground together. But we can't fuck yet. The little fairy is making her visit. Raven only smiled, not caring much about that as he cuddled her tightly. Instead of being lustful, he became loving and passionate, kissing her cheeks and forehead, nuzzling her soft nose as her vine stroked his skin. No worries, we have all the time in the world. How about we make next week's date an overnight stay? Since Lilith knows, it's much easier now. His words were alluring and enchanted her, looking up at him with her green eyes filled with desire and anticipation. Then. I'll make sure to keep it nice and clean. Do you like it shaved? Hairy? Or trimmed? Emily's body suddenly shuddered as she felt his fingers slip under her dress, stroking over her pelvis before resting on her tummy. A little trimming, but that soft garden is nice to touch. And then. I'll make sure to get Lilith home safe. Or she could stay at mine tonight. We bought lots of makeup, and I don't think you can teach her how to apply it, right? Emily asked if she planned to get along with the women who gave her respect, and Lilith just lacked an older female figure. Emily wanted to become a big sister to her and help her become softer. Wow! Raven exclaimed, his forehead pressed against hers, feeling the warmth and sweet flora scent of Emily filling his nose. You are too good for me, Emily. What should I do to make you happy? You already do. How about another kiss, hee. Moi mph. The Dryad moaned as his hand slipped around his back, stroking her gently and hugging her against his muscular body, not sexually, but comforting, as her eyes closed, feeling delighted. I'm happy. Then stop talking. He said seriously as he grabbed her waist and lifted her into the air. He spun around and gently placed her onto the car's driver's seat, slowly helping her legs adjust, pulling her seatbelt while changing her dress for comfort before kissing her one last time, as Lilith leaned over and kissed his cheek as he kissed Emily. "I'll stay with Emily. Tonight is the night you will be late, right? It's Friday," Lilith said, her soft lips sticky and warm against his face as she blew raspberries against his cheek. He chuckled, looking at her wryly as he leaned over and kissed her. "That's right. Tonight I will go see a cute little cow and fox." Lilith nodded, smacking his cheek and sitting in the passenger seat as she fastened her belt, pulling out her tongue to Raven, rubbing her lips as she could still feel his warmth and taste. "Don't forget, tonight we will be having fun. When he turned around, he saw Emily smiling at him, and his heart melted. Her eyes glistened with her pleasure and happiness as she watched him. "See you tomorrow, darling." Her car began to hum loudly as she turned on the ignition, her green eyes watching him before she closed the doors. Her car then shot off into the distance rapidly, booming with a light cloud of dust. "I want one," he thought, saving enough credits for an excellent car for his days off. Raven then took out his phone, opened the Ardent Fox app, and began to type a request to spend the night with Miriam. "Oh, you can choose the play. Let's see." He began to tap boxes to see if he could book certain plays and actions. There were things like threesome, milk play, rimming, and many amusing things. Raven decided to try something he rarely did before as he thought of the sexy Minotaur mommy Miriam. Boob job. Confirmed, anal virginity. Confirmed, overnight stay. Confirmed, total 300 credits. Confirmed, let's see my cute Minotaur. Tonight will be a lovely evening. It didn't take him long to arrive in the entertainment district and find his way to the Ardent Fox. For some reason, the same cute fox was sitting on the wall, her soft blonde hair and amber eyes watched him as she smiled brightly. "Ah! Orc brother. Hello there, Miu. It's Raven, remember?" "I remember a huge cock. Such a lewd girl, despite being so young." Raven looked inside and noticed it was rather busy, with many customers being ushered inside. Since he was in no rush, he sat beside Miu on the wooden bench. The vast building was incredibly stylish, so he didn't worry about random people causing trouble. "Are you doing well?" he asked. A little hard. Sometimes I get starving. Hungry. Do they not feed her?" His body turned to the girl, her eyes glowing with a strange light as her body leaned against his side, wrapping her silky white arms around him, the creamy skin smooth to the touch as her soft hair like new velvet. "Do they not feed you often?" Her face looked a little sad or somewhat awkward as she finally replied. "My diet is hard to arrange. I am dangerous," they said. What do you eat?" Immediately after his question, her delicate palm began to slide down his arm, stroking his almond skin, caressing his muscles gently as she traced along his slightly rough hands nearly twice the size of hers before she placed her youthful hand on his crotch, her face instantly lighting up as her little mouth opened in a vast circle. "Oh! So big!" Miu exclaimed. "Whoa! Miu!" Raven also reacted, his bulge growing as it caused her hand to bounce before she grasped half of it, unable to take it all in her tiny hand. "Hey! My food is in here," they said. "But it might kill them if I take it." Raven suddenly realized that she might have been a member of the demon fox race and not the regular beastkin. His eyes turned to face her as she gave him a seductive glance. "How about I suck a little now?" However, despite wanting to do that, he tried to distort those soft red lips and her pretty face with his fully erect member, making her gag and drool as she almost vomited, her teary eyes begging for mercy, but he continued to skull fuck her. Miriam's pretty face came to his mind, and he pulled away. He looked at the pretty fox and gave a wry smile, taking her hand from his lap and looking her in the eye, stroking her smooth head, before standing up. Chapter 58. Miriam's changes. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Sorry, but I have a meeting with a charming woman, although you are extremely charming. I want to spend the night with Miriam because I miss her. Can you forgive me? Miyu nodded, her hands no longer touching him as she watched Raven walk away, sometimes looking back at her with a fleeting glance before he entered the store. Miyako sat on the bench, her figure fluttering like a shadow as the voluptuous Madam of the Verdant Fox appeared, her long blonde hair without a single split end shimmering in the early moonlight. She had a small pipe in her hand, her body visibly shuddering. Raven. I'm already full. You've improved again. She thought to herself, taking the pipe into her soft red lips, the cherry lip gloss sticking to the tip of her pipe as she began to suck on her vixen stick, a unique herbal remedy like the dragon stick, but this was gentler and helped mana circulation slow down. As she exhaled, a sweet scented pink cloud puffed from her lips and the pipe. HAA. To think I must smoke this now to avoid pushing that boy down. How pathetic of the demon fox matriarch. Too much energy from his body, I need to speed up my plans to keep pace with him. Let's see how he deals with the succubi or that new Lamia who likes to play rough. She giggled as she watched the darkness slowly encroach the red district, her mind feeling more relaxed due to not being hungry, hoping that he would come every day to fill her up. I can't become greedy, not yet. Let him grow more, when he can handle more than me just touching his cock. I'll proposition him. My cute little almond orc. Raven walked inside with a confident step. He was rather energetic today despite having done those things with Lilith in the dungeon. Since then, his tiny seed of purple energy began to pulse faster, and his body filled quicker than before while it seemed to absorb the energy of females at twice the speed. I wonder how long it will take to fill the second bar of the gateway of the heart. That little fox touching my cock filled it almost halfway. I hope she becomes an adult soon. While deep in thought, he made his way towards the front desk, passing by the busty brunette and blonde fox as he saw Miriam standing in the distance. Her body wore a long frilly red dress while her brown hair was tied in a curly side ponytail. She seemed to be waiting patiently as a customer came up to her as he approached after confirming his booking. Hey! Your tits are huge, how much? I'm Dallas Wallace, the manager at Venta Corporation. How about we take a room together? Miriam only glanced at the man before turning away, her eyes locked onto Raven as she batted away the business care he offered. Her body moved to the side, more than a head taller than the man, who backed off seeing her moving. Oi! Don't ignore me, you little slut. The moment he spoke derogative terms, a tall woman suddenly entered the front door. She was sexy and made people think the word enchanting was created for her. With each step, the men began to feel their cocks growing, but the moment she got close, they suddenly discharged, feeling deflated as her sharp eyes made their bodies tremble. Madam Miyako! Miriam exclaimed as she saw the angry fox approaching. Initially, she thought this client might be essential but wouldn't apologize. She was now exclusive to Raven. Raven didn't notice her as he moved to Miriam, supporting her waist and shoulders, her face blushing from his gentle actions as she wrapped her arm around him after hesitating momentarily, her soft body pressing against his chest. Who the fuck are you? The slightly plump, short male who called himself Dallas shouted at Raven. Sorry, I'm her sire, this little cow is mine to cede. Raven spoke with a confident and aggressive tone, his vast hand squeezing the soft buttocks of Miriam out of sight as her lips released a sexy moan, her face turning red as she felt his thick scent and powerful aura filling her body again. Raven, please. Take me to the room, I missed you so much. Her voice was sultry and pleading as she nuzzled him, pulling his body towards the second floor. The pair slowly faded into the distance as Dallas stood there shocked. He was sure this woman was the stupid cow labeled as frigid by his friends in their little circle. What's going on? He muttered before a sudden shadow moved closer to him. Do you want to know? It'll cost you a lot of money. Miyako laughed at the massive change in her formerly frigid minotaur, now like a female cow ready to be seated by an influential sire. Once he heard the voice of Miyako, the man's body shuddered. He felt a burst of adrenaline as his member shot his feeble load before feeling extremely weak as she moved further away, his eyes dazed as he looked up at the madam and felt a sense of fear, swiping his bracelet of the payment function. Paid 10,000 credits, a few minutes later, he left the Ardent Fox, his eyes stunned and feeling wholly deflated after having completely lost as a man, seeing that big thing. Comparing it to his, caused a sense of defeat that even his vast amount of credits couldn't fight. He instantly began searching for his wife, her gentle words after sex. Size doesn't matter, darling. It's okay. You shoot so fast because you love me, right? But now he was filled with despair. He walked the streets with his head down, entering the nearest cafe and buying 3 cups of coffee to drown his sorrows. Dallas Wallace awakened to the pleasures of NTR. His heart felt a sense of pain. A sense of pleasure. Because along with the video of a particular almond skin orc, there was a video of a female. That looked 99% like his wife, even the mole on her butt was the same. As she was riding the cock of a young man. Almost double his size. Even if it was nothing compared to that monstrous orc. He began to transform into a cuckold. Planning to get cameras in his house, wanting to see the filthy things his wife did in secret as his crotch bulged from the 2 videos he bought from Madame Miyako for another 20,000 credits. But the strange flash of her eyes made it impossible for him to remember the first video. A strange blur filling his mind. Who did I see tonight? He thought. Meanwhile, Raven's arms wrapped around the soft body of Miriam, her powerful body pushing him against the door, too eager to start that he didn't even open it yet. Various girls guiding customers were shocked, seeing the usually cold and stoic Miriam so lustful, her hands sliding across Raven's exposed member, as they all took a moment to gawp and realized who it was. The succubus, the lamia, the centaur, all 3 of them watched as that huge rod filled the tiny hands of Miriam, who was kissed passionately as the male didn't just seek his pleasure but was holding her tightly in an affectionate hug, his right hand stroking between her legs. Their lips parted as Raven broke off the kiss, his lips smacked on Miriam's silky lips before he slid the key into the door, his eyes fixated on her face, both now breathing deeply. Miriam. You are so beautiful. Raven. I missed you. The warmth you gave me. I wanted to meet you so badly. You do not need to say those words, you make my life worth living. The couple then entered the romantic couple's room through the door, which was more significant than usual for the Ardent Fox. It was decorated with candles and plush bed covers, making the room seem even more significant than usual. Ah. Yes. Miriam gasped, her arms wrapping around his neck and chest as she pulled him into another thick kiss, their bodies slowly shuffling into the room before slamming the door tightly as their passionate evening started. While the other couples were a little stale and cold, the succubi watched as her heart felt a little lonely. The 2 males that bought her services just slammed the door open and tossed her onto the bed. The lamia wanted to feel her tail wrapping around that thick body, having him impale her with his massive rod as she tightened around his body, spending a night of extraordinary bliss. Instead, her client was too fat for her to feel any muscle, the sticky and greasy sweat of his body oozing onto her scales as the pin that penetrated her was barely felt past her entrance as her eyes peered at the clock. Sadly, the centaur didn't even have a customer. Just like the past 5 nights, the last customer ended up leaving in tears as she looked insensitive and asked if he was inside yet. Only to turn around to find his face sweating as he was thrusting with all he had. Her eyes watched the room. Raven and Miriam disappeared into before a soft hand tapped her shoulder, a beautiful female fox gave her an enchanting smile. Theta Madame Miyako. The black-haired centaur gasped as she lowered her head, sorry for not having a customer again. Don't worry, Diane. How about I offer you a special program? Would you like to spend the night with that orc, on rotation with Miriam? As she began trotting around, this was a moment that Diane would remember forever and always be thankful towards Miyako and Miriam for this moment. Chapter 59-59. Half-Orcs and Boob Job, R18, you are listening at Novel Full.audio. Mirima's body pushed roughly against Raven, her massive breasts squashed against his chest, kissing him passionately with her soft lips, her tongue tasting the salty taste of his saliva. She pulled his shirt over his head and undid her unfastened buttons, her red dress dropping quickly before the next layer of clothing disappeared as he pushed her onto the bed and threw his suit jacket into the distance, breathing heavily as she pushed her tits together, the enormous creamy mounds revealing 2 large bumps against her thin, laced bra. Raven. You wanted to put your hot shaft between my soft tits. Are you a naughty boy? Fufu, look at how hard my nipples are just thinking about meeting you today. I was so horny. Oh. Did you masturbate? He laughed, his shaft extending as it poked from the rubber of his boxers, a slight stain from his arousal towards Miriam's lewd change and the little fox flirting with him, a sticky dark patch staining them. She was excited to see his erect cock, the amount of pre-cum as it began throbbing and expanding in her eyesight. Raven leaned forward, his hands gliding along her back as he stroked her back one hand, and supported her heavy cow-tits with his other, the sheer weight causing him to feel excited. These huge things will wrap around my cock. So cool. He pushed the top half of her bra down and undid the clasp of her bra, letting her full boobs jiggle as he threw it down to the floor with her dress. Now free from her bra, her massive mammaries were exposed in all their glory, her pink nipples pointing towards the ceiling, and a hint of gray-white liquid dripping from the tips, as Miriam let out a lewd moan, pushing them against his chest, as he felt a slightly warm, but sticky sensation. Your breasts are so sexy, they could drive a man crazy with lust, Miriam. I hope you are the right man to be driven mad. She said seductively as she grabbed a handful of his cock, no longer the frigid woman, her warm palm began to massage his tip gently, the warm sticky good from his opening smearing over her palm as her fingers caressed his shaft. Miriam, have you been well? I missed you. Raven whispered as he leaned forward, letting his cock slide through her palm, the tip pushing her thumb and finger apart until they could no longer touch each other, her warmth and soft body enveloping him as he kissed her soft lips with a slight touch, enjoying how her little mouth opened slightly. The soft exhaling of breath sent a surge through his veins. I missed you dearly, Raven. She said as their tongues tangled, stroking and gripping his shaft firmly, and he began to enjoy her wet heat as he slid his entire length within her soft, warm hand. Miriam's body was hot to the touch, her milk dripping as she became hornier and hotter, her pussy growing damp. But she knew there was one more step before he entered her body. Or at least, for now. "L.O., Raven, you need to come first," she whispered, licking his cheek before releasing his member, allowing him to fall back onto the bed with a bounce. He asked for a boob job in the app as she took a bottle of thick, slimy lube from the desk, it was vanilla-scented and flavored. She squirted a large amount into her cleavage as she pushed them together tightly. Hey, do you like the look of my shiny tits, the customer? Fufu. She giggled as she pumped the thick and dense substance into her fleshy teats, coating them in a slippery fluid that clung to her skin and breasts. He chuckled and stroked his cock, now fully erect, as his boxers slid to the ground, as the lube leaked from her tits, her nipples growing slightly harder as his shaft stiffened even more. I love your beautiful body, especially your breasts, come give my cock some of your love, it's so hard for you. Miriam's eyes focused on the vast tip as she slowly swayed towards him, the sticky slapping of her tits filling the room as her soft body knelt between his legs. Her small hand grasped his cock by the base, rubbing along his veins with her thumb as she began to drool over his tip. She slid her long tongue and looked erotic as she looked up at him as her other hand slid down his shaft, smearing the excess lube and drool along it with a slimy squelch. I want to put my cock between those huge cow tits of yours and spray my sperm all over your face and body. He spoke, his eyes staring at her as the cheeky minotaur mother leaned forward. Her pink nipples brushed along his glands as they swayed with her body, opening her squishy lips and sucked on the tip of his cock with a delighted face, her hot saliva running down the shaft and dripping off his purple helmet, and she released the tip, licking and swallowing the gooey mess, her lips forming a pout and a sigh. "Don't tease me, Miriam, or I'll spank you. Yufu mph. Her lips slowly pulled off his tip, a slimy and thick string of drool oozing as she rubbed along his tip with her thumb. "How about you spank my fat meaty ass while I suck your huge cock? Foo-foo dot." As she spoke, the horny succubus opened wide and stuck out her tongue, licking his tip before pushing it down his shaft, feeling her saliva's silky texture and slickness. Raven enjoyed the soft and slippery warmth as she swirled her tongue around his tip, the suction of her mouth drawing his foreskin back and exposing his glands before sucking it again, her head bobbing and moaning. He groaned lightly as she continued to take his entire length into her throat, her warm, silky tongue stroking the sensitive underside of his shaft, the muscles flexing and contracting as her nose bumped against his pelvis, her lips pulling away slightly as she took him deep into her throat, her cheeks hollowing as she consumed as much of him down as possible. Gobu nnngh mmf. Her little mouth began to splutter. Raven felt terrific as her throat tightened around his cock, her huge tits pressed against his balls, and her mouth vibrated from the gagging and heaving. Miriam's nose began to bubble with drool as her sexy eyes looked up at him, slowly. Little by little, she pulled off his cock, slurping the juices from herself and the lube of his sticky cock shining in the light, with a loud pop as she flicked her head back. "I love the taste of your cock. Did you spend much time rushing today? The scent is so musky. And thick. Here your beloved tits will make you pew and spurt that thick milk in mommy's mouth. Foo-foo dot." Raven felt a strange sensation of sticky warmth wrap around his shaft, her vast breasts enveloping almost all of his shaft as the large tip poked out from the top, pushing against her chin. There was a strange sense of oppression, nothing like a blowjob or sex. It was tight, but felt weird, as the slight vibrations from her heart began to pulsate as it traveled the sensation onto his glands. "Ah, I love how messy and hot your mouth is. How you flick your tongue on my glands is good. Now move those heavy tits and make me come," he said, watching as her big breasts moved to form a perfect sphere of flesh. A few inches above the tip of his cock, sliding back and forth as she squeezed the sides of her massive breasts to push them towards his cock, wrapping around it entirely as the heat of her body enveloped his meat club. Her body moved slowly as she pulled them away and squeezed it hard, stretching out his cock's girth as the pink nipples grazed along his shaft, a soft moan escaping her lips as their tips brushed, sending shivers of pleasure through her body. "I can feel how hard your cock gets each time my tits move, Raven. You're so cute. It's throbbing inside my cleavage. Your little tip is dribbling with dirty fluids, such a horny little orc." He held still for a second, his shaft quivering as she continued to squeeze and stroke his cock, the friction making his head go numb as she pumped her tits. The sound of his cock being slapped against her skin and smearing the thick lubrication around inside her cleavage echoed throughout the bedroom. Finally, her mouth lowered, sucking on the tip, her long tongue sliding along his tip with a sloppy sensation from her drool and the lube. MMPHO. Fuck. Ugh. Miriam gasped, his cock pushing against her throat as he felt an intense burst of pleasure run through her body. Raven's hips jerked violently from the pleasure of her soft, sticky mouth and her tits sliding around his shaft, unable to control his thrusting hip as he bucked and moaned, his tip slipping down her throat repeatedly, pushing her deeper. "You like it, don't you? MMNPHNNNGH. Do you like how it feels when I suck your cock? Gobu NMM," she said between deep breaths. Raven grunted, his body trembling as he felt her tongue begin to lick and swirl around the tip, sending waves of pleasure through his body. His seed was bubbling within his cock, ready to spill out like water from a shaken bottle. Just as it was about to pour from his tip, she released her grasp and slid her lips back until only the tip remained within her mouth as it began to spew forth with a strong stream of thick liquid. The pressure built up as he felt it squirt out, and out, and out. The milky fluid flooding her mouth, and she swallowed everything, taking every bit of it and swallowing as many gallons of hot semen as possible as Raven's body trembled. He had never had an orgasm this intense. Ever. It was almost too much for him as she continued to pull off, swallowing and gulping, his cock pumping out thick amounts of white, sticky fluid, which she swallowed. As her mouth filled with his seed, the flow gradually slowed until it stopped. And she began to pull her head from his cock, his sticky tip smeared across her cheek and chin, as she wiped her chin with her arm, a satisfied smile crossing her face. That was incredible, Raven, you made a mess down there. She said, grinning as she stood up, looking at the pile of white stuff that had dripped from her cleavage as she began to smear his sticky cum into her chest, moaning as it felt like his seed was burning her body with pleasure. Raven, my cunt is so wet, are you going to put my ass or let my pussy come and then fuck my ass? You're lewd, Miriam, I never would have guessed they called you frigid before. He leaned forward, their tongues meeting in mid-air, as she kissed him, her hand stroking his cheek and her fingers sliding through his hair. Come on, darling, fuck me. She cooed. He smiled and lifted himself back up, holding her tightly. He didn't care about her chest sticky with his cum and lube, rather enjoyed the dirty parts of sex as he kissed her cheek, lifting her heavy body with ease as she blushed, her vast ass too big for even his hand to cover completely, as the soft flesh melted into his hand. As I said, Miriam, whenever we are together, you are only mine, maybe I should kidnap you, so you are always mine. His voice slightly lowered, but Miriam's face blushed as her heart began to race, her hands clasping tighter onto his body as he gently placed her onto the bed. I'll save your ass for the last shot, be prepared to faint and cry for mercy, my little cow, this sire is going to seed you fully tonight. Chapter 60. Miriam's Anal Virginity, R18, you are listening at novelfull.audio. This time Raven didn't waste time going down on her, she was soaking wet before he even touched her, her slit now sticky with thick honey oozing down the soft petals. He felt her eyes burning with lust and desire as he pushed his half-erect cock straight into her soft ravine, the tight walls no different from last time, quickly clinging to him with her warm and slippery folds as he pushed deep inside her cunt. The mere sensation and sounds of her cute moans caused his dick to reach full mast in seconds, her insides expanding before they tightened around him as if to fight against his growing member. Miriam. You're so warm and squishy. Fuck. This cunt is so good. He almost shouted as the thick cock pushed to the base, her womb crushed under his full erection, the cute face of Miriam trying to act like she was fine, but her breathing and moans only became louder with each movement of his hips. Uff. Fuck me harder, you horny pervert. Fuck. She begged, her face flushed red and her chest heaving with heavy breaths, her big boobs bouncing as he slammed into her, and her thighs slapping against his body as Raven moved, in and out. He slowly slid his cock deep inside her, crushing her most sensitive and defenseless place, his curved tip slowly pushing further. Raven began poking into the entrance of her womb, causing her to squeal and gasp with each movement before his glands dragged along her soft, spongy walls, their silky surface powerless against his orc rod. So tight. And noisy. Does it feel good, Miriam? Yes. Yes. Oh yes. Foo-foo. I want more, darling. Keep fucking me, please. Raven could hear the pleasurable gasps and yelps that escaped her quivering mouth as the tip pushed deeper and deeper into her cunt, her inner walls constricting and gripping on his shaft, the pressure sending chills of pleasure through his body as her pussy began to tighten around him. Miriam's arms wrapped around his back as she clawed at him, her huge tits swaying from his powerful hips, making her body shudder and shake with each thrust. Your slutty tits are oozing milk, you should suck on them and clean them, So wet. The sudden suggestion surprised Miriam, but she obeyed without hesitation, pursing her soft lips as she felt his hips become more violent and fierce. His cock crushed her womb and soft walls as the sloppy squelching filled her ears, the slight pain in her chest as it grew harder to breathe. Her fingers released his back as they spread out, digging into her soft breasts, pushing the large nipples towards her mouth, the slimy mixture of her sweet milk, his salty cum and the vanilla lube filling her mouth as his sheer force caused her body to move the bed with rough bangs sounding. Ugh, mpo, nnnngh rave.n. His hips pounded against her body as the bed crashed against the wall. A few droplets of sweat fell on her skin as the tip pushed deep into her cervix, completely violating her womb as it pushed through the tight ring, her last protection, feeling his massive cock throbbing and pulsating, filling her insides with a burning heat, as the rod as hard as steel now savored her body at will. That's it. My cute little Miriam. As she felt something warm start to grow from within, sucking on the tips of her nipples, sliding her tongue along her areola, giving a strange sensation as her body arched after feeling a warm tingle inside her womb as he pushed deeper. The tip reached her deepest core and pressed against it as it stretched open, Miriam squealing as it entered, the tip pushing against her stomach, her belly pushing on it as it penetrated deeper, her inside stretching to allow his thick shaft to fit. Ah. Uff. Ah, it's too big, stop. NNNGH. It's raging inside my womb. How will I have babies in the future? She exclaimed before passing out, the sight of her big tits moving about and shaking with a groan sending shivers of pleasure down Raven's spine. He felt like he was being torn apart inside her, but the sensations were indescribable, he had never been so hot. His cock was buried inside her womb, the warm, wet walls wrapped around his shaft, milking his shaft and squeezing him. He was so close to blowing his load. Are you ready? For my big load, baby girl. He slapped her ass with a heavy blow. Now pushing her legs higher as she suddenly jolted awake, he could feel her body constantly convulsing and shuddering as his cock reached even deeper, able to rub the top of her walls, a spoke he failed to tease last time, her mouth no longer able to suck, only wailing and groaning as she clamped tightly onto him. NGH, no, my ass. Fuck my ass. It's not my pussy. Her voice hoarse as she remembered that he didn't ask for vaginal sex, that would come after they finished filming. Her heart raced as she felt his throbbing cock about to spit its hot sticky sperm into her womb, she could feel her eggs screaming in pleasure for him to inseminate her. However, she couldn't do that. Her powerful legs bent against her chest as his cock slid out of her soaked pussy, squelching before his thick tip popped from her cunt, leaving it gaping wide, her body rolling on her side, as she sucks her ass seductively. Miriam felt dazed. Still, she didn't want Raven to be disappointed, her ass had been cleaned by a professional nurse earlier as she leaned forward, pulling her thick, meaty ass cheeks apart, revealing the puckering hole, now slimy and smeared with her thick honey that oozed and bubbled from her messy cunt. Take my first time. Raven. Darling. Fuck my virgin asshole, make me come for the first time with my ass. She heard the roar of Raven's grunting as he grasped his cock and stroked it. She could feel his warm breath over her ass as he pulled it closer and closer, the tip barely visible as it scraped across her wrinkles, rubbing and probing until it finally sunk into her anus, the thick tip quickly pressing through the tight ring and entering her ass. Ugh. Fuck. The pair both moaned in pleasure. This wasn't just her first time doing anal sex, Raven too had never fucked a girl's asshole, the first time he tried was a human female, his tip pushed inside but split her skin as she began to panic and bleed. Thus he stopped. This time, the thick honey from deep inside her, the slimy goo from his cock and lube already coated her asshole, as his glands firmly pushed through with a loud squelch, her mouth opened wide, as she grasped the sheets raising her ass further into the air. Oh God. Darling. It's going to tear my ass apart. Fuck. It's so tight. The pressure on my stomach. MMMGGH. Miriam bit down on the pillow as she felt the slimy fluids helping his cock slowly slide inside her, the narrow passage expanding and spreading as she felt even the most minor bumps along his shaft. Ow, ow. Oh. Stop. Ah. Ugh. Ah. Ow, ugh, ugh. My ass feels so hot. So warm and wet. I can feel you pulsating inside of me. He felt her muscles clenching around him as he thrust deeper and deeper, the tight ring expanding to take in his length before firmly gripping around his shaft, causing Raven to feel unbelievable pleasure from the most minimal movement. His hips didn't swing, only gently swaying, as his hands gently stroking her ass, massaging and caressing it, pulling on her flesh as the inside of her ass twitched and sucked on his cock. I love her ass. It's so tight. Like a vacuum. Was all he could think before he grabbed her shoulder, pulling her down his body and pushing his pelvis forward in unison with her butt, the tip of his dick pressed firmly against her sphincter before he pushed forward, her pink hole parting to accept him fully into her bowels, the smooth walls of her anus flexing around his flesh, gripping tightly on him. Miriam didn't know why, but sex with Raven always felt terrific. She couldn't see the vast amounts of purple liquid pumping into her body, from her pussy and ass, the sperm she swallowed before now expanding the energy through her insides as she looked like a brilliant purple light to Raven if he focused. At the same time, her pink mist began to enter his body through her ass, down his shaft, causing a vibrating pleasure in his body. NGH. Ha. Yees. Ahanan. Yes. Give it to me. Fuck me. Fuck my ass. Ah. Ugh, hi. The sound of her screams and moans made the urge to blow his load grow as he continued to push himself deeper, her hot ass gripped tightly to his cock, making it impossible to pull back, his hips moving with a strong sway as his hands pulled on her buttocks, as Miriam herself twisted violently, writhing about like she was possessed as he drilled his giant cock deep inside, her ass gripping him as if it was an alien parasite devouring his dick. MMPH, oh. Oh. Ayahan. Oh. Yes. Fuck me. Fuck my tight little ass. Fucking hell. That's one sexy cow milf. Raven could hear how loud and wet Miriam's moans were as he moved faster inside her ass, as well as the occasional squelches of her wet pussy. Miriam's tight hole squeezed and milked his shaft as he filled her body, sending his orgasm racing to the surface, his balls contracting and unleashing a hot stream of semen deep into her bowels, filling her up and spilling out from around his shaft and his glands, as he repeatedly slammed into her, his cock swelling and growing thicker as the milky juice gushed into her. Ngaga. Ugh. Yes. Please give it to me, Raven. You're fucking the shit out of my ass, darling. Fill my ass with your hot cum. Do you want me to pour another load? He grunted as she roared her answer. Yes. Give it to Mool. Shove it up my ass and rape the fuck out of me. The powerful vibrations of her screams vibrated his pelvis as his cock fired shot after shot of his hot, sticky seed deep into her asshole, the tight grip around his cock becoming smoother from the vast amounts of sticky lubrication that began to cling to his cock and her anal tunnel. When his spurts ran dry, he held himself there, allowing her to feel every inch of his shaft as his body became still, his cock pulsating inside her asshole, the thick coating of cum covering her insides, the slippery, slimy warmth spreading deep within her bowels, the milky, creamy substance oozing and seeping down his cock. You did well, baby girl, Raven whispered, panting after his orgasm, kissing her back while caressing her soft, sweaty ass that clamped down on his member still buried inside her back passage. Thank you. For taking my virginity. For the first time. I could finally give you something new. NGH. Let me rest, then let's shower and spend the night having sex. Okay. Miriam whispered, her body breathing heavily as her ass jiggled with each movement. Raven couldn't take his eyes off her beautiful creamy butt as a final load was ejected deep into her body, only a cute whimper sounding from her lips. Slowly pulling out from her ass, a loud noise filled the room as the sperm and sticky juices were spewed from her asshole. Raven didn't seem to care, gently grabbing her body as he tapped the room service button, slowly carrying the cute MILF into the shower. His already recovered rod swayed with its grandeur, showing dominance, unaware of the several red lights filming them in 16K and from almost every angle. Miriam, even if you were used countless times, it doesn't change the fact that to me, every inch of your body, everything about you is priceless. I don't want other men to touch you anymore. Miriam's eyes closed tightly, pretending to be sleeping as her heart started racing, his words meaning more to her than he could ever know as the pair entered the bathroom, free of any red lights, while a small hot bath filled with bubbles was waiting. Let me wash you, and make you feel relaxed, my cute Minotaur lover.